We've got to stop the salt. So let me give you the salt story. Seawater. Seawater is the highest concentration of sodium, and it contains 92 minerals. In fact, in the book The Calcium Lie by Dr. Robert Thompson, he says the clearest indicator of a creator God is seawater, because seawater has the exact mineral balance and proportion as is found in our body, in our blood, in our bones, in our tissues. And the good news is we don't have to drink seawater. In fact, we shouldn't drink seawater predominantly. So last year when I was staying in Ireland, and my friend Jenny that I stayed with, we drove 10 minutes every day and ran up and down the sand hills and dived into the sea, and I always had a couple of mouthfuls. But predominantly I drink water. Water is the liquid that God designed everyone to drink. Now, of those 92 minerals, sodium takes up 30%, and chloride takes up approximately 50%. I think it's exactly 52%. And because they're the first crystals formed when the water's evaporated, man scoops up the sodium chloride, bleaches it white, puts aluminium with it, and there's your table salt. Now be careful, they can even call that sea salt. Well, it came from the sea. But the salt, so table salt, basically is 2 minerals. The salt that we use is Celtic salt. And Celtic salt is a hand-harvested sea salt, and it contains 82 minerals. So where are the other 10? They're in such pico proportion, barely measurable, that it's inevitable that some are lost in the evaporation process. Himalayan salt is probably a little bit more freely available, and it contains 75 minerals. So it's still fairly close. The membrane around every cell in the body is a bilayered membrane, 2 layers. And there are sodium-potassium pumps inside that layer. And that sodium-potassium pumps are ever basically going like this to keep the balance of sodium, highest amounts outside the cell or extracellular. Inside the cell, it's potassium is the highest mineral. There is a little bit of sodium. But these sodium-potassium pumps keep that in its balance. But if someone is taking table salt is such harsh minerals, you inject that straight into the blood, you would kill a person. Sodium chloride needs all the other minerals to buffer those 2 harsh minerals. So someone's putting sodium chloride on their food. Have you noticed that they put it all over their food without even tasting their food? Do you know why? Because these 2 harsh minerals kill the taste buds. Whereas Celtic salt, Himalayan salt, with all the minerals, they awaken the taste buds. So let's say we've got someone having table salt on everything. So what's happening with sodium levels in their body? They're rising. And they're not eating any fresh fruit and vegetables because it takes too long, and they're so busy they just grab the quick mushy food that hardly needs 3 bites and it's down. So what's happening to potassium levels? Potassium levels now are dropping. With the rise in sodium and the drop of potassium, osmosis happens when diffusion with the highest concentration merges into the lowest concentration. What's now happening to sodium? Sodium levels are rising in the blood. That causes the cell to swell. There's your high blood pressure. The doctor's right. This salt will contribute to high blood pressure. Dr. Lilangri is a French doctor who's written a whole book on salt. It's called The Secret of the Sea, something like that. And he says, when I get a patient with high blood pressure, I immediately put them on Celtic salt because it'll bring the balance back. In the Bible it talks about salt. In Matthew chapter 5 verse 13, Jesus is speaking. He says, "You are the salt of the earth. If the salt has lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men." Old English. I love the poeticness of Old English. If the salt has lost its savour, I'd like to suggest that this salt has lost its savour. It's lost all the other minerals. What does the Bible say? It's now good for nothing but to be cast under foot of men. And when I was in Minneapolis in the winter, I saw them throwing the salt on the road to melt the snow. And I thought of that verse. I thought, oh, that must be the sodium chloride. Whereas the Celtic salt, it's a hand-harvested sea salt. They wait till all the water evaporates. And you'll notice when you buy Celtic salt, it's grey. Hasn't been bleached, and it's very, very high in minerals. In fact, that Celtic salt has 3 magnesiums: magnesium sulfate, magnesium bromide, and magnesium chloride. And magnesium is a water-hungry molecule, so it pulls water into itself. And that's why when it's raining a lot, you look at your Celtic salt, it'll go really wet. It'll go really well because it's so high in magnesiums that they're water-hungry molecule. But when you put a crystal of Celtic salt in your mouth, how big? About the size of a sesame seed. Your mucous membranes are absorbing those minerals. The magnesium is taken to the cell, and then you drink your water. That magnesium pulls the water inside the cell. It's the quickest way to hydrate a body, is to take that little bit of salt and that glass of water. But there's more. Inside this membrane, there's a little motor. And when the water rushes through the membrane, that little motor starts spinning and gives us a unit of energy. So when everyone mid-morning's running out for their coffee and their cigarette to give them a lift, you go and find a tree, breathe your nice, remember, LSD, low, slow, deep breaths, have your Celtic salt and your water, and you'll go back in revived. They'll go back in spun up, but then half an hour later, where are they? Crashed. So there's salt and there's salt. And one little old lady said, "I was too scared to tell my doctor I was having salt. I just told him I was on a mineral supplement." You're the doctor here. If you've trained yourself out of salt, go lightly as you reintroduce that salt. Our palate tells us we need salt. We need salt. We need the minerals. Our bones, our blood is made of this.